Hey everyone, it's Kayvon with Askari Art. So this video is going to go into detail in how I prep my canvases before I paint alcohol ink, and to answer a few questions about that, and whether you can actually paint on a pre-gessoed store-bought canvas. So we're going to do two things in this video. Hopefully it answers some of your questions. Let's do it.
So here's the store-bought canvas. So here we're going to add the alcohol. I'm adding the champagne and pearl white. And you can see where the stain is left. And I'm going to try to lift it here with additional alcohol. It's just not working. I'm also leaving the alcohol to see if it will sink in so I can remove the stain, but it won't work. I'm using 99% alcohol. So I wouldn't recommend painting on pre-gessoed canvas.
In this example, we obviously tried the alcohol ink and it didn't work. You can't lift it. It leaves a stain, right? So you can apply this technique to existing alcohol ink that you've done on canvas, or acrylic paint that you've done on canvas, and now you want to do alcohol ink and you don't like the acrylic painting or even oil painting. So this process actually works for all the mediums that I could possibly think of. So the supplies that we're using today, I'm using a cup of water. I'm using two types of sandpaper, a 400 grit sandpaper and an 800 grit. And I'll show you what I mean, why I'm using two. And I'm using Kills 2 water-based, it's water-based interior exterior sealer and stain blocker. So in other countries, you may not have Kills 2. There are other examples of very similar seal blockers and stain blockers that you could use appropriate to the country, and always use water-based. Do not use oil, because oil-based will eventually turn yellow. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to actually pour some of the water down, and I'm going to use the 400 grit. I've got a sand block as well, but I use the sand block for the 800 grit, so I'm just going to fold this up. If you don't have a sanding block, like so, I'm just going to fold this up, and I'm going to just move it around. I'm going to sand this down. And the reason why I'm sanding this down is because I want the texture to be smooth in certain areas so the alcohol ink will flow. It's not because Kills will stick to this no matter what. And the reason why I'm using water is because I want the water to absorb the dust. I recommend using a P100 filtration. They're the filters, the pink filters that are circular. It's these right here. They're little 2097 filters that you can hook onto a mask. Right here, you can hook it on and use that, or you can use your existing respirator. It'll do the same. So what we're gonna do right now, since it's wet, I don't have to worry about the dust much, as long as I keep it wet. And all I'm doing is just sanding the edges, just a nice coat of sand, not too rough, not too much, because I'm just trying to get some smooth surface out of this. Now your canvas is gonna naturally start getting soft, and it's gonna start drooping a little, and that's okay, because as soon as you add the Kills, it'll tighten it back up. Once you add water to any kind of canvas, it'll tighten back up. And this is store-bought, so there's tips and techniques that I can show the advanced user who's built their own canvas. That's gonna be in another video. For now, we're just gonna sand this down, not too rough though, you're not supposed to be pushing down too much. And I use 400 grit at first to kind of just loosen, to get rid of some of the texture. I do like some of the other texture, so I'm not, gonna sand it completely down, because it's supposed to have a bit of a texture. And then I'm just gonna use some paper towel and dry it off. I'm drying it off and picking up some of that dust. So once the water does dry, the dust doesn't just start going up in the atmosphere, in the air. Okay, so just kind of drying it up. All right, so I've got a 3-inch angled brush right here, and I'm gonna open up my Kills Let's straighten that. So this is the kills I've got left over. So what I'm going to do is I'll just dab this brush in with a healthy coat. You want to do a pretty healthy coat, thick coat is what I mean. And I start from the middle and I just go out. I start with the middle first and just let that dry. You don't have to wait too long, and then I work the edges. So the reason why I do this, I start from the middle and then start on the edges, because once the middle dries, it will contract this canvas and tighten it up again. And that's what I've learned over the years of just painting, you know, gessoing and kilsing these canvases. So I'm just dipping and treating this canvas. Now the good thing about kills is that it will block this underneath painting pretty quickly if you're putting a really nice thick healthy coat on. I typically will do 2 coats of kills and a sand in between. So after this is done, I will basically go back and paint another coat of, sand it, and then paint another coat. But then when I sand it, I don't sand it with a 400 grit, I'll sand it with the 800 grit. So the 800 grit is actually a finer sandpaper. It's almost like you could barely feel it on your fingers when you rub your finger across. And the reason why I do that is because I want the sandpaper to just get rid of some of the brush strokes and help with that texture, removing that texture from the canvas itself. But I don't evenly sand the whole canvas down. I leave certain areas protected and some areas sanded and some areas rough. Okay, so the reason I do that is because I want it, again, like I said, to have some texture underneath the alcohol ink. The other thing that I like to do is as I'm applying kills to it, as I'm sanding, I'm thinking about the composition that's going to be on this canvas. So for this piece that I'm going to work on is I'm going to actually start from the top, and I'm going to do alcohol ink from the top and let it come down and then spread it, okay? So for that piece, what that means is, since I'm thinking about it compositionally as I'm gessoing and sanding, I'll know what areas to smooth out and what areas to leave rough. So that helps when you're working through it, because you can, you know, it's things that you're thinking about as you're doing something so basic and meditative, in my opinion. Like gessoing in canvas is, or using kills, what I call it just gessoing. But when you're using kills and you're just brushing this on, it's so meditative, it's calming. And I'll just let you hear this, the brush. Okay, so I've got this down, and what I like to do is compositionally, again, if I know that I'm gonna have something on the top, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna smooth out, I'm gonna go back and forth on this bottom edge. And then when the areas that I know I'm gonna have alcohol ink, I'll crisscross like this. And I'm sharing all my secrets with you because I don't believe in keeping any secrets from anyone. And no 2 alcohol inks or styles are really replicated. So I'm not even worried about anyone stealing my style or my repeating my process or technique, because I'm sure I was inspired by somebody else who had this process and I've evolved it. So I'm not worried about that. I hope you can take what I do and you evolve it the way that makes sense to you. So again, I'm just going Xing the gesso or kills, in my case, in the area that I want the ink to sit. Or if I feel like there's a direction that I need to take, because these brush strokes will help with the movement of the ink. It's not a drastic movement, but it's enough to where you can see it. So again, I'm putting a healthy coat of gesso on. I'm just trying to smooth it out as much as I can. It helps to have a very clean brush to do this. And I would not recommend adding water to this to thin it down. I just don't worry about the brush marks. We're gonna sand it down, but I just want you to start thinking about the composition as you're doing this. If you haven't done so, it's okay, but just do some X marks like so on your canvas so that it helps with some of that background texture. All right, so we're gonna let this dry, and it typically takes about 30 minutes to an hour to dry. We want to wait for it to dry completely, because once you start going into sand again with the water, if it's not completely dry, it's going to start rolling up the wet paint in these like weird, just kind of like exactly how you have like paint on your finger and you do this and it rolls it up. And you don't want those pieces all over your canvas, because then you're going to have to go back and sand it again. So as you're sanding wet paint, it's going to lift it too much, and it's going to start smearing, and you don't want that. So I'm going to let this dry completely, and then I'll come back and I'm going to show you the second step of actually sanding this down for the second time. All right, I'll be back. All right, so I'm back. So this is dry and it's taut again. The surface is actually pretty stiff again. So what we're gonna do now that it's completely dry, I'm gonna spill a little bit more water on here. And now I'm gonna use the 800 grit. You could go back and use the 400 if you like, but I'm gonna use the 800 to kind of just soften up these brush strokes. So I'm gonna go back again and just go back and forth, sand this down. You don't have to push down because it is fabric. You just, this is just to kind of give you that smooth Yuppo paper feel that you may want. You're spreading the water around. This is white, so it's kind of hard to see, but I've got it sitting on cups right now. Typically I would do this not sitting on cups, just on the table, but for this purpose it's fine. And if you like certain areas that you want to smooth out a little bit more than others, you can always just kind of scrape. If you have brush strokes or something you don't like, you can go in there and use both if you want. Now you're using water because you want the water to absorb the dust, and that's why we're doing that. And it helps with sanding as well. It's a little smoother. There we go. And now we're just going to use this. The water helps the process. And the reason I'm using 400 grit and not anything harsher is because this is the store-bought canvas, and store-bought canvases are thinner. The canvas has got a thinner weight to it. I don't really trust going on with a harsher sandpaper, as they say. You can on like a standard, like if you're buying the fabric yourself, the canvas yourself, you can get a thicker weight to where you can sand it with a harsher sandpaper. I just, I stick to 400. It's just me. So we're gonna dry this off. You can wait for it to dry if you like. You could just wipe it down with some paper towels. And since the Kills is water-based, you could just, it could just be damp, and then you can go back and there we go. All right, so it's dry. Now we're gonna put our second coat. Again, start in the middle and work your way out. So, well, actually I take that back. We start in the middle, like so, and then I start putting paint in the corners. And again, this helps tighten the canvas as we go through this. This makes the canvas tighter because the middle dries first and then it starts pulling the canvas in, starts pulling from the center. You want to make sure you get a really healthy coat of Kills on here, because at this point we're going to let this dry and then we're going to come back and actually start painting on it. So with the colors I mentioned earlier. Very thick, healthy coat of Kills 2. Now I'm gonna smooth out, or go as, now you're gonna get little chunks and stuff, don't worry about it, that's from the Kills 2 bucket. So I'm going just back and forth here to keep it as smooth as possible, and then I'm gonna X brush around here. Now, I wanted to show this example because a lot of people have asked me about how I treat my canvases. They want Yupo paper that's very large, and you know, it's hard to find. There are companies that sell large Yupo paper, but they don't sell Yupo paper that's like 10 feet by 6 foot or 6 foot by 4 foot, you know. That you would have to resort to canvas or linen or some sort of fabric that will be archival, that'll last, you know. And most of my canvas pieces do last. I've got some that have lasted over 5 years with no issues, no fading, just using our, you know, Kamar varnish to seal it with UV archival. And I have a video on my channel to describe that process, and I show you how to do that. Look in my channel for the video if you're interested in how I treat my canvases after I'm done with the alcohol ink. All right, so that's it. I'm gonna let this dry and we're gonna start painting. Stay tuned. If you haven't subscribed already, please help the channel out and do so. Askari Art, my name is Kayvon Askari. I have a Patreon page that you can support if you like. There's different tiers like $2, $5, and $10. I answer your questions directly. Leave a comment, I'll answer your questions there. But if you need detail and stuff, the Patreon support would really help. I've got a Facebook page where I can go in and we talk about and we critique each other's work, everything all positive. And I've also got a merchandise store. It's on askariart.com/blog. There's a, you'll see it up the top menu. It says Askari Art Merchandise. I've got shirts that have my name on it with my mantra, certain slogans on the shirts that I go by. That's enough of that. Thanks again for the support. Thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video where we're gonna actually go in and paint. All right, take care, bye-bye.